Do you think Goldilocks should have gone into the bear's house? Ask 10 people this question, and then if someone answers yes, they think she should have gone into their house, then you'll put a tick in the yes box. But if they say no, you'll put it in the no box. The next person you ask might have a different answer. Put it in the yes or no box. Yes, I think she should have gone, or no, I think she should have stayed out. Oops. When you've asked 10 people and you've put your ticks in the boxes, record your voice telling us which answer was answered the most. So what that means is if there's most ticks in the yes box and there's not so many in the no box, then most people that you've asked this question to have said, yes, she should have gone into the bear's house. That might not be what happens. You might find that most people say no. And in that case, we want to know whether it's yes or no that has the most ticks. What do most people think about this question? We are learning to be conversant with a range of genres. That basically means that we're learning to be familiar with, to know things about a range of different stories or different types of stories. Now, a fairy tale is a type of story or a genre of story, and fairy tales have things in common. For example, Cinderella has things in common with Snow White, and Hansel and Gretel has things in common with the Three Little Pigs, and so on, which makes them or gives them the name, the characteristics of a fairy tale. So let's talk a little bit about the things, the characteristics or the elements of a fairy tale. So a fairy tale normally starts with once upon a time. Once upon a time. Or if it doesn't say that, it might say one day. And it normally ends, the story normally ends with a happily ever after. That's normally the way fairy tales are written at the beginning and the end. They normally have some sort of magical element. Magical. So those magical things might be elves or fairies or talking animals, or witches and other magic. Witches. So they're not realistic. They don't tell us stories about our real lives. They are made up stories. In a fairy tale, there are good people or good characters, and there's usually a bad character. And the good character normally gets help from other good characters, so they get help. And the bad characters normally try and ruin the plans of the good people. Now, because fairy tales have been passed on through families and generations of people, they don't they're not set. So the setting is what we're talking about at the moment, where things are set. They're not set in cities, or they don't normally have cars and motorbikes and planes and things like that. They are set in castles, or in the woods, sometimes in cottages. It just depends on the story, but it's not a contemporary, a modern, it's not something based on today's sort of experience. So let's recap that quickly. So normally there are fairy tales are magical and they involve magical characters. And normally they are set in magical places like castles, not in cities, castles or the woods. There's normally a beginning like Once Upon a Time, and an ending like Happily Ever After. And there's normally some mythical creatures like elves. And there's normally a good character or a few good characters and bad characters too. So those are the things that tell us that we're probably reading a fairy tale. If you've noticed these sorts of things in a story, it's probably a fairy tale, and we